This is one of my favourite bits in the entirety of the Avengers vs. the Peter Factor story. Hope you enjoy it. If I get a bit choked up, don't blame me. It's a really beautiful bit. The Avengers vs. the Peter Factor by midnightwolf2192. Chapter 25, Carol Danvers, Part 2. What is this place called? Nebula asked as Peter as they entered the atmosphere just above Wakanda and the country became clearer. Wakanda. It's amazing, Peter replied. He was about to say more when Quill swore softly. Little Pete looked at what caused him to swear and he smiled. Don't stress, that's just the Wakandan scout ships. No doubt they will take us to the landing pad. Sure enough, the two jets identified themselves and began leading the Banatar to the landing pads. As Quill started the landing process, Peter watched as a large group of people made their way out of the palace, Tony leading the way. Here we go, people. Welcome to Terra, Quill said as he punched a button and opened the rear hatch. While everyone got ready to disembark, Peter remained firmly in his seat. Carol noticed and ushered the others, except for Nebula, who simply refused to leave the boy's side. What's up, small fry? Carol asked as she knelt in front of Peter. Peter looked up at her, unshed tears shining in his eyes. He's gonna be so mad at me, Peter said softly. Before Nebula or Carol could speak, Peter steamrolled on. I just keep messing things up. I mean, ever since I came into his life, I've been constantly in trouble and burdening him. I don't know why I keep disappointing him. Kid, I've known you for 5 minutes, but from what I've seen, you could never disappoint anyone, Carol said. She took Peter's hands in hers and squeezed them until the boy looked up at her. When I arrived in Wakanda, the first thing I noticed was how loved you are. Everyone outside that ship was practically tearing one another apart over who would come and get you. You wouldn't get that much love and support from such powerful people if you were a burden to them. Peter smiled tearily up at Carol and wrapped his arms around her neck. Carol hugged the boy tightly and shared a glance with Nebula. The kid really had no idea how protective and loved he was. After a minute, Peter pulled away from the hug. You ready, small fry? Carol asked. Peter nodded, and he and Nebula stood from their seats. Carol led them towards the exit of the ship, and she climbed down first. Stark was staring intently at the landing ramp and frowned when she appeared. His gaze softened when he noticed Peter, but before he could move, the princess was sprinting for them. Peter! Shuri yelled as she launched herself at the boy. Peter had enough time to scoop the flurkin off his shoulder and into Nebula's arms before Shuri collided with him. Peter wrapped his arms around his friend and shushed her as she sobbed into his chest. Oh, Bast! Peter, I Bast, you're all right. Never better. It takes a lot more than that to keep me down, Peter said softly as he hugged his friend. Shuri sniffled slightly and squeezed him once more, pulling away. Peter wiped her tears away and smiled at her. I have so many things to tell you. Plus, Karen got some awesome footage of space. I can't wait to show you. Carol watched as Peter made his way through the group of people, each one hugging him tightly before checking him for injuries, before a small brunette woman dragged him into a tight hug. Nebula and the Flurkin stood awkwardly to the side, and Carol snickered slightly. The Luffamoid looked so out of place. Finally, the brunette released Peter, and the boy turned to Stark. Stark was out of his wheelchair, but still didn't look too well. Peter took one look at the man and collapsed into his arms. Il mio bambino, grazie Dio. Il mio ragazzo. My baby boy. Thank God. My boy. My boy. Tony whispered in Italian into Peter's hair. The boy cuddled close as he could to the man. Tony was running his hands through Peter's hair as he cradled his head to his chest. The boy pulled back for a moment and for a second and looked into Peter's eyes, before kissing his head firmly. Shoot, Pete, I thought I'd lost you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Peter whispered, and Tony kissed his head again. Eventually, the two pulled apart, and Nebula was instantly by the boy's side. Tony stared at the blue woman in surprise, but Peter just smiled. Nebula placed the kitten back onto Peter's shoulder and attempted to smile at Tony. Who's this, Pete? Tony asked, looking between the two in confusion. Peter smiled up at the woman and squeezed her hand tightly. This is Nebula. Nebula? This is my dad, Peter said proudly. Tony shot a glance at the boy, and the gathered people watched as Tony's entire face lit up. The smile that crossed his face was blinding, and he nodded tearily at the boy. "And this is a kitten? Well, Miss Captain Marvel Danvers says it's a flurkin, but I have no idea what that is." "You have an incredible son," Nebula said, and Tony's smile, if possible, got even brighter. "What's a flurkin?" Steve asked, and Fury started shaking his head. "Not another one? Really?" Fury cried as he rounded on Carol. The woman simply smirked. "It shows him," Carol teased. "I wasn't about to separate them. I'm crazy, but not that crazy." Peter was staring between Carol and Fury in confusion, before quickly shrugging and returning his gaze to Tony. Tony still had a hand on Peter's shoulder, and the teen leaned into his side, reveling in the comfort that came from his father figure. Carol normally wouldn't have interrupted their moment, but let's be honest, she was a troublemaker. "Stark, your son is one heck of a pilot," Carol said with a smirk, and while Peter perked up, Tony, Pepper, and May all paled. "What?" Pepper whispered as she stepped up beside her fiancé. "Miss Captain Marvel Danvers taught me how to pilot the spaceship," Peter said excitedly. Tony stared at the boy with wide eyes, and Carol simply smirked. "Well, Mr. Peter and Mr. Rocket were fighting over who would do it, but then Miss Captain Marvel Danvers did it. Oh, also you need to come and meet people." Peter took hold of Tony's hand and led him over to where the Guardians were standing. Carol openly laughed as Tony stared at Groot and Rocket in awe. Once everyone had reassured themselves of Peter's safety, the Wakandan royals led everyone back inside the palace. The Guardians were staring in awe at what they were seeing, and Carol had no doubt Groot, Peter, and Shuri were about to become an unstoppable force. 3 days after their arrival, the Guardians were preparing to return to space. Carol was planning on hitching a ride with them back to Xandar, so she would be leaving too. "Thank you again for bringing my boy home," Tony said as the Avengers prepared to wave goodbye to the visitors. He then handed her a device with a smirk. "An upgrade for you, courtesy of the Princess, Build-A-Bear, and myself. It should work no matter where you are in the universe. It has my number, Eye Patch's number, and Peter's number preloaded. The kid would never let you leave without some way to contact you. He's a pretty fantastic kid," Carol said, and Tony grinned proudly. The pair shook hands before Peter approached the Guardians. "I am Groot," Groot said sadly, and Peter wrapped his arms around the tree. "I'll miss you too," Peter replied. "But you have the phone. We can call each other any time. And the new console to play games on." Peter made his way around the Guardians again before stopping in front of Carol. His face fell for a moment before he launched himself into Carol's arms. "I'll miss you," Peter said, and Carol scratched the back of his head gently. "Thank you." "Any time, small fry," Carol replied. When Peter pulled away, she smiled at him. "Call me whenever you need, and if Stark refuses to teach you how to drive, call me and I'll come and take you to Lorvana. They have some awesome racetracks where I can teach you all about driving and piloting." Tony choked slightly and Carol laughed. She kissed Peter on the head before following the Guardians onto their ship. "Nebula, come on," Gamora called, but the Lerthamoid shook her head. She wrapped her arms around Peter and the recently christened Helix the Flurkin and hugged them both from behind. "I am staying on Terra," Nebula said firmly, and Peter grinned. Gamora wanted to protest, but her sister actually looked happy. Who was she to ruin that for her? The Guardians all boarded the Banatar, and after a moment the ship was heading for Earth's atmosphere. 1 month later. Carol was on Xandar when the phone in her pocket went off. She pulled it out and couldn't help but laugh out loud at what she saw. Standing on a building were Peter and Nebula, both in suits of Stark's design. Nebula having started to join Peter on his patrols as soon as they returned to New York. Helix was standing in front of them, but what made it even cuter was Helix was wearing his own super suit, complete with a mask. Carol read the message and laughed. Apparently Helix spends all his time when I'm on patrol crying, so Dad, Nebs and I made him his own suit. An hour later, the phone went off again. This time there were 3 messages, one from Fury, one from Tony, and a picture message from Peter. The photo was from behind of Helix. Carol could see that his mouth was open and his tentacles were out. In the tentacles was a man, and Carol could only laugh. "Did you know he could do that?" Peter's message was all in capitals, but Carol could tell he was probably excited. "What the heck did you give my kid?" from Tony. "I knew this was a bad idea." "A flirkin'." Fury. Carol laughed and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She was probably due for another trip down to Earth. The Peter Factor 32, Avengers & Co. 0.